Your mind is AI. The way the mind takes snapshots of the moment and then turns them into this kind of video, this inner movie is rather like AI. I've used AI before to, for instance, take a picture, whether it's an actual photo or AI generated picture, and then use that as a prompt to create an AI video. And what happens is you're looking at a picture and all of a sudden the picture starts moving, right? Something like when you use an iPhone to take a picture and you use that, I can't think of what it's called, but it's like a 3-second, or not even a 3-second, maybe like a 1-second movie or whatever. So it's like a moving picture. It's exactly like that. So if you look at how the mind is functioning moment to moment, it will be snapshots. If you can see it really clearly and see it closely enough, if you can pay attention closely enough, you'll see that the mind is really just taking snapshots rapidly. And then what happens through some kind of magic is one snapshot seems to blend into the next snapshot and then blend into the next snapshot as if there's something moving between those snapshots, like something continuous moving between snapshots. And then the movie just starts to kind of create its own narrative. It actually departs from reality. It departs from the conditions of presence. And this happens all day long. This is what it means to get lost in thoughts, to daydream, to mind wander, right? To catastrophize, to ruminate, to become anxious, to become depressed. Like these are mind states that get built as an overlay over what's right in front of our face, over the sense, the mass of sense data that we call this body mind, this expansive sense field that's actually always available, rather intimate and effervescent. This mind state gets built over the top of it. And then what happens next, the next step to that is that we learn to use that mind state as a pacifier. We learn to use that mind state as something that soothes us, because we don't actually know how to soothe ourselves thoroughly enough. So then instead of using the body's natural ability to soothe itself, the nervous system's ability to actually use presence to soothe itself, that just to be alive, that aliveness, what it does is it uses dissociation to soothe. So that's kind of the two steps of how this happens is first the mind makes this snapshot and then sneakily turns it into this internal video that at first looks like what is happening, and then it starts to look not like what's happening. It starts to look like a memory, starts to look like a rumination, starts to look like a conceptualization, thinking about yourself, thinking about your problems, thinking about other people, right? It kind of just deviates from presence. And then what happens is something inside of us learns that, oh, I can actually use this to pacify. I can use this to soothe myself when I don't feel soothed. So this is what I talk about when I talk about waking up from that fundamental illusion that there is something, some separate one that is actually moving from moment to moment. That's what's required for us to actually buy into that film strip, that inner film strip, is the feeling. And this is very fundamental to our mental processing. So it's not something that usually is obvious immediately upon hearing this or looking one time. But if you really dig in, if you really start to inquire into what's happening or looking closely at what's happening, you'll see it. You'll see that there's this flashing. The mind is almost like taking pictures. It's not almost, it is. It's taking pictures of the kind of conditions of the moment, and then it's happening quickly. And then some other sort of apparatus or some other, it's a sense really, it feels like something, it feels like you, is actually moving from picture to picture. That's what's required for this illusion to maintain itself, is that sense of continuity of self. This is why in Buddhism, ultimately, we have to confront the fundamental appearance of a self, of a separate self. Because if we don't, then that film strip can just keep sucking us in, so to speak, right? And of course, there's no one getting sucked in, but it has that feel to it for sure. So we have to actually look closely enough and with enough interest and care and frequency that we see that there's actually nothing moving from moment to moment, that there's no need to buy into that inner world, right? To the rumination, to the imagination and catastrophizing about life and endless planning that is just totally unnecessary. And, it's all fear-based, really. Fear and, I would say, doubt, fear, rumination, worry. These are most of what the mind is actually doing, even when it's starting to plan in a positive way, or it's starting to use these ideas that you can imagine something into being. That's just the next layer. But underneath that, there's a kind of a feeling of not okayness. There's a feeling of doubt. There's a feeling of fear, and that's driving the whole thing, right? So it becomes this kind of positive feedback loop in a way where because we're using thought and distraction and dissociation to soothe ourselves, and yet it is actually fundamentally uncomfortable. So then we use more of it and then more of it until it becomes this sort of positive feedback loop where it can become so acutely uncomfortable, and we call that suffering, we call that unsatisfactoriness. It becomes so acutely uncomfortable that you just have to break out of it. You have to find a way to break that spell because it's just miserable. You realize, like, I'm alive, things are generally okay around me. There's no reason I should be feeling so much angst and so much discord with life and so much self-doubt, and yet I do, right? Why is that? So this is why. It's because we've learned to use the dissociation itself as a pacifier. And the key to this, rectifying this issue, this fundamental problem, is seeing ultimately that there is nothing that is moving from moment to moment. There's just appearances. There are just appearances. So that's why I ultimately will lead anyone who's going through this process into the sense fields. You have to be willing to just inhabit the sense fields. And this happens in sort of two spectrums. One is the spectrum of insight and awakening and awareness, right? Waking up to what's what, seeing the clarity that is here, that is, in a sense, non-continuous. And what I mean by that is, for continuity to appear, we actually have to have a thought about time. We have to believe in time. When you look really closely at what's happening in the moment, there is no time, right? So there is this timeless presence, we could call it, a sort of timelessness. And that's the first step. And this is insight work. Beyond that, you can really start to look more closely once you're not hypnotized by that inner movie constantly. You can start looking more closely at the mechanism, and then you'll start to see this non-continuity, that it's actually more like pixelated or quantized, that there are just appearances, right? And as you start to move into intimacy with the senses, with the body sense specifically, you'll notice that this mere appearance and quantized non-dualistic experience that's just here all the time does not follow any kind of continuity. It doesn't bind itself in any kind of mental model like time. It just is. And it's very clear, very present, very alive. And so this is just one other way of looking at how we break this spell. And then the other axis, or the other spectrum, I said there's kind of two spectrums to this. The other spectrum is reminding ourselves why we don't need to use the mind or thought to pacify. Reminding ourselves that we actually know how to feel okay in our own presence, in our own sensations. And that's shadow work. And so this is why I don't just say it's all about insight, it's all about awareness. There's no need to do shadow work, because that's misleading. You can get somewhere with awareness work, but in deeper realization, the shadow work is necessary, or else you'll still have a sort of addiction to using the mind to pacify frequently enough that the deeper insights will not clarify and stabilize.